G'day, Ben from Duck Plain Chicken here with the second video in this build series of the Arii 1/170th scale Macross factory, the number MD-02 with the fighter, with the VF-1D in fighter mode. So I've started painting everything up, and look, they do provide color callouts, they're pretty basic. But what I've done is, for the actual hanger side of things, I'm going to use the previous ones I've built as sort of a template, so that when I eventually get all four of them built and they're all lined up, they look as though they're all part of the same structure. So there's a lot of sort of colors here that are I've already determined that I'll be using. And to take you through some of those colors, first of all, a lot of the yellow pieces, which are sort of like the railing, the cart bed, also on this floor piece which sort of rotates over. I've painted that yellow because I'm just going to mask off those chevrons there, and then the rest of it will be painted grey. And we also have the main boom for the crane arm that sort of moves across. And for that I have used SMS School Bus Yellow. I do love this colour, it's a really good sort of safety yellow colour. Now for a lot of the grey pieces like the girders and the uprights, it doesn't look much different to the primer I used, but it is actually a different grey. And for that I'm using dark ghost grey. So I've actually sort of used that for a number of components. And with the back wall, I've sort of painted this top bit, I'll mask that off and then do the next bit that I want to paint, mask it off, do the next bit, and so on and so forth. Right, for this top piece, and you can see where that goes on the other one, so along here. For that I have used SMS Hyperchrome Cold Tone. Now for these engines, I wanted to, like in the colour callouts, they're kind of all painted silver, the same colour, but I wanted the body of it to be different to the ends. So for the body I'm using SMS Metallic Steel, and then for these pieces which go on either end, and just to sort of show you you can see there's a bit of contrast there. It is coming up very dark on camera, but it does have a metallic tint to it, or a metallic finish to it. And for that I'm using SMS Metallic Gunmetal. So that way there'll be at least a little bit of contrast between, the ends and the body of these engine parts. And that's as far as I've got it for the painting so far. I still need to do a little bit more work on the fighter itself. So there's still some cleanup I need to do here. But I think for the bulk of the fighter, I'll be using SMS J3 Amber Grey. Now, this is probably a little bit too dark, but it's actually what I used for the armoured Valkyrie in the previous set in this series. So I want to keep it sort of consistent. And they've gone sort of a quite dark tan colour in the photos, so it's reasonably close to what we've got here. The orange I'm going to have to mix up a custom mix. I don't have anything that's sort of close to that, so yeah, I think that's what I'll do for the fighter, but I've still got to do some cleanup on that. Now with the yellow down, I have masked those lines off. You can see the tape there. Pretty straightforward. It's just about ensuring the tape is bedded down in the panel lines, and then follow it around with a scalpel or a blade. The number 2 is a little bit tricky, but just need a very sharp knife to cut around it. So now for the floor here, I'll use the dark ghost grey over the top of that, and that should be almost ready to go. I've also masked off the chevrons on this piece, which is in the floor. It sort of rolls over and reveals an engine. So again, this is all masked off, and over the top of that I'll use the dark ghost grey. Now I've already put the dark ghost grey on the top here of the back wall, so I've masked that off. And the next step is to take some German grey, and I'm going to spray sort of along this panel, back panel here, and maybe some of these other details, and then I can mask those off and then go with the next colour. There's also some details like these are the end of the crane rail, and they'll be done in German grey along with the hook, and also a couple of the detail pipe pieces I made, which will sort of go into this area in here. Okay, I'm just going to peel up some of this masking just to see how it's gone. It looks pretty good. Okay. I find that sometimes using a scalpel to get sort of under the tape helps. Be careful, of course. Let's have a look at this too, because this is what I'm worried about. It's difficult to cut around that too. Alright, that's come up pretty good. Alright, so I'll go ahead and unmask the rest of that. There's another one I'm interested in, which is these chevrons here. It's a little bit rough in places, so I'm expecting there might be some issues. Not issues because of the paint, but issues because of my masking. It's not too bad. And of course this will sort of sit, you know, in there. I reckon that's going to be all right. Okay, so that's another thing I can do off camera. I painted the German grey on some of these areas, so now I need to mask that off, and I've bought myself a new toy, which is, this is from a company called Ichiban, and this is their tape, push cut tape cutter. So here's the model number on it. Yeah, so this is the MT15P, so it's 15mm wide tape. And what's nice about this is you've got the button on the top that does the cutting, and you've got this lever underneath which pulls out tape, and you can see that it sort of, you know, pulls it out, cut it, pull it away, it gives you a nice clean edge. So if I want to mask something like this, it's going to make it a little bit easier. If you're interested, I have actually tried to put Tamiya tape in that gadget, and I couldn't get it to work with Tamiya tape. Works perfectly well with the Ichiban tape, which is obviously what it's intended for. I don't know if the Tamiya tape is wound too tight or something, but I found that Tamiya tape just wouldn't feed through. But anyway, I'm going to give this stuff a shot. If you're looking for a longer piece of tape, you simply sort of hold down the lever and then just pull it out. Okay, and then cut and pull. So really nice, nice sort of system. All right, so yeah, I need to mask the rest of these off for these little braces here that need to be painted in the same color as the floor. So I'll do that off camera as well. Now for the fighter itself, I'm going to, you know, I've obviously still been doing some putty work, cleanup work. Now for the canopy, I'm going to try something where I'm going to basically lay down some surface of black first, and then over the top I'm going to do clear green, and I'm just hoping that maybe it'll catch in the light and it'll give a bit of an idea of polarized glass as opposed to just being sort of you know, straight black. So I'm going to give that a shot, see how it goes, and then I'll put those two down and then I'll put a gloss coat over it. And then we can sort of, you know, get an idea of what that result's going to look like before I mask it all off. While I've got the black out, I'm going to sort of shoot a little bit of black down the, you know, in the feet area here. So just so that's less obvious what's going on in there. I did think about putting a bit of mesh or something, a bit of detail, but I actually don't think it needs it. I think as long as it's dark and you can't sort of really see what's going on, it'll be fine. And then I can sort of start painting up the, you know, the rest of the fighter components. Continuing with the masking and painting cycle. So these couple of areas I've masked off here and here. I used charcoal by SMS, and I masked all them off, and the next step is to use some of this gunship grey on some of the other details. So like the surrounds of these panels, this vent thing, this side piece. And I think for in here, I was sort of having a look at the other kits in this series that I've built, and there's sort of some yellow domes that are on them. And at the moment it's all very grey, so I think this little area in here I might actually sort of paint white and then yellow over the top, just these little sort of devices here, just to add at least a little bit more colour to the back wall, because it is getting very kind of grey. But at least you get to see sort of the process of me, you know, painting, masking a bit, painting, masking a bit, and so on and so forth. Now for the legs, of course I painted the sort of the interior of the feet parts there black. So I'm going to use some metallic steel for the feet, and also for these joint bits in here. That's sort of what I've done on the other, you know, one of the other kits in the series. So I'll sort of keep that consistent. And then for the canopy, I painted this with the black surfacer primer, and then I've masked off some areas. So now I'm going to go in with some clear green and then clear gloss over the top of it. And then I'll mask the whole lot off, and then it'll be ready to go. So there's this sort of black line that goes around. We've got the you know, the glare, anti-glare panel on the nose here. So yeah, just mask that off. The tape I use here is 0.4 mil thick, so it's very thin, but it'll give me a nice sort of detail line that hopefully you should be able to tell the difference between the sort of outline of the canopy and the actual glass once the clear green and gloss go on. My previous one, and for this part here, I actually mentioned before I was using grey, but I'm actually going to use gunmetal SMS. For the figures, I airbrushed the faces using flesh pink, and then I can mask them off. And for the jumpsuits, I'm going to use green, so I'm going to use Dunkelgrün. Now, a lot of the figures that I did for the previous sets, they all have different colours, so it kind of helps break up the fact that it's the same 3 figures that are used in all the kits. So I've got orange, blue, now I'll have some green. Masked off the cockpit after using the gloss and the clear green over the top. I don't think the clear green's made much of a difference, but there's at least a little bit of a tint. I'm going to spray the intakes using metallic steel. So once I've done that, I can mask those off. I masked off some black areas on the back of the fuselage here, just some small shapes, and then I'm ready to go for the orange. For the legs, I've masked off the metal pieces, so the joints and the ends of the feet. Now for the custom orange I want to make, the SMS orange I have is probably a bit too bright. So I want to make it a little bit more red. So you can see how sort of vibrant that orange is. I just want to sort of move it a little bit more into the red space. So I'm going to mix up a custom mix using a little bit of red. To do that, I save all my bottles from the SMS paints that I use up. They're good bottles for mixing. And I attach just a sticker to the side so I can indicate the levels of the different paints I use. So if I ever need to go back and replicate it, I've got a better idea what the ratio is. So I'll start with the orange, and I'll put a fair amount in there. And I'm just going to mark off where the level of that paint is up to in the jar. And I'm also going to just write the code of the paint so I know which one it is. So you can see not a lot there. I'm not going to need a lot of this to mix up. I always mix more than I actually need. Okay, and then the red that I put in, I suspect it's only going to be a very small amount of red. So you'll be able to see here, it'll just be a splash of red. Yep, and that's it. That's about all I'll need. So you can see the difference between just the straight orange and my mixed colour. So it's a little bit more red. Masked off the side bit and done the yellow areas, which I'll now mask off so I can do the whole lot. And for the whole back wall, I'll use SMS and grey. So once that's all covered, I'll be able to unmask it. Masked off the intakes on fighter, and I've also done the orange on the back there. So now I'm ready to coat it in J3 Amber Grey. And here's the legs that I've already done, so it's time for unmasking. So I've done the orange and the grey, so I'm happy with those. This is the back of the fuselage, so unmasking the orange. And it looks like I've stuffed up here, so it looks like I've missed with my masking at the end of that orange bit. So I'll probably leave the rest of the masking tape on it and remask that area and just paint it off. Okay, the stabilizers. No problems there. Also with the Nichiban tape, there's no problems with the masking of this type of paint. There's the wings, the edge in the orange. That's come up pretty well. Okay, here's everything unmasked on the back wall, so I'm pretty happy with that. We'll do a little bit dry brushing on some of the areas later on, but overall I'm pretty happy with the result. For the cockpit, I've painted the grey, I've unmasked the intakes and the orange area. Now just to show you, this was the previous armoured Valkyrie from the previous kit. Just to show you that I'm using the same colour. So even though it is a bit too dark, I did just want it to be consistent. I fixed up the orange on the back of the fuselage here, so quite happy with that now. I also did a bit of detail painting, just painting in the lights on the wings, and that I just used a little bit of Model Air chrome. That was just brush painted on. Did a little bit of chrome detail on the landing gear as well. And for the head, for the camera piece on the head, I used the chrome and then a little bit of enamel clear green over the top of it. The side pieces on the side of the head, I used Vallejo Mecha Colour Phantom Grey. And so again, that was just brush painted on. Okay, everything has got a gloss coat. A utility gloss coat. It's not super glossy, you can see that, but it is enough so that I can use some enamel panel line accent colour to do the panel lines. The gloss I used was just SMS Premium Clear Gloss, and I didn't do multiple coats, that's why it sort of still looks a bit rough, but it's enough that the enamel paint will flow a bit better in the panel lines. Give it a good shake. And of course, you know the deal with this stuff. It is touch it to a panel line and let physics do the rest. So it'll just wick around And if it is something that you're not aware of, using these enamel products over a different paint type means that it makes cleanup very easy. So whether you're using sort of water-based acrylics, lacquer-based acrylics, or just lacquer paint, you can run this stuff over the top of it. That won't affect the underlying paint. And so that means I can make a bit of a mess here, and it is really straightforward to clean up. Now for this kit I am going to use just black, I think. I don't think there's any reason for me to use any other colour. I'll sort of really highlight these panel lines pretty well. So if we have a look at, this is the wing, one of the wings for the fighter. You can sort of see how that just wicks through. This kit does have pretty deep panel lines, which is good. Makes it a lot easier. The other thing that you might find with this stuff is that if you're finding it's not wicking the panel lines particularly well, there could be one or two reasons. One is the panel lines aren't deep enough or aren't refined enough. The other reason may be that the enamel panel line you're using is maybe a bit thick. You may need to thin it down a little bit with a bit of enamel thinner. So that's usually one or two reasons. Anyway, I think you get the idea. Looks really messy, but what I'll do is I'll go through and do all the panel lining for all the pieces, and I will probably leave it for a good day or so. It doesn't actually really matter how long you leave it for with the enamel paint, because you can always remove it with enamel thinner later. It's better to leave it longer than shorter. If it's still wet when you try to clean it up, you'll find that whatever product you use to clean it up will actually draw the paint out of the panel lines, and you don't want that to happen. So I'll let it dry a good day or so. I've done some detailed brush painting on the figures. So you can see I've done the gloves, boots and the hair. I've done that for each of the figures. And so for the boots I've just used Mecha Colour Phantom Grey. For the hair I've used a combination of, well, I've got one guy here, he's got black hair. So for that I've just used pure black. And then for one of the others, I used brown, and then sand yellow for the blonde hair. So I detail painted those with a brush, and then I gave everything a gloss coat. So now it's time to do some panel lining. Now for their clothes, I'm going to use black. It's just about letting the panel line colour sort of wick all the gaps. So you can see that's pretty messy. That's fine. Once it dries, and clean it up just fine. Now for the flesh tone for the face, I'm going to use some orange brown. Now the faces aren't particularly well detailed, but they look very flat at the moment just with the sort of flesh colour I use. So I'm just going to go in with just a dab, just to bring out some of the facial details. And again, that'll need a little bit of cleaning up once it's dry. Okay, in order to clean up the panel line mess you can see that I've left there, I am going to use some of this shellite. Well, you can use enamel thinner, it'll do exactly the same thing. And what I do is I'll get a cotton bud. I've just decanted some of the shellite into a smaller container. Sort of get a bit on the cotton bud here, dab the excess off on paper towel, and then just rub it across the panel lines. Now I've allowed this enamel product to dry for a good 24 hours. which means that I can use a little bit of force to remove those extra spots that I've left behind. And it means that I'm less likely to draw out the enamel product from the actual panel line because it's had so long to dry. And you can see, the difference between the lines on the right there versus the lines on the left. So that's all I do to clean it up. And I'll do 2 passes. So the first one I'll get rid of most of it, and then I will come back and check it, a bit later, just to make sure I haven't sort of missed any spots. Because the problem is if you miss a spot and then put the matte coat over it, there's nothing you can do to clean it up after that. So you want to make sure you address all the mess before you put the matte coat on. Cleaned up all the panel lining, so before I put a flat coat down, I want to do the decals. So we get 2 decal sheets, and they are water slide decals. So you can see here, this one's for the VF-1D. Now I am a little bit concerned about these decals. I had troubles with one of the other kits where the decals just would not come off the backing paper. So I'm going to do these ones off camera, and I will use some warm water, I think, for these ones, just to see how I go. If I run into problems, I'll certainly let you know, but if not, you'll see them on the finished model. You also get this set of decals, which are just, I guess, where you can put anywhere on the kit. So, it's come sort of some pretty ordinary looking warnings, some arrows, some numbers, and the UN Spacey logo. I'm not going to be using any of these ones. What I am going to do is use some third-party decals. So this set, TL Decals 3 by HiQ Parts. I've used a couple of these numbers upside down. I've used some of these numbers on the previous ones, so if I show you what that looks like. So you can sort of see up the top here, the 01. I've also got a UN Spacey kite logo and words UN Spacey. These actually come from a 1/100 kit, from one of the Valkyrie kits I've built, just because they're sort of more modern decals. They're, I haven't had any troubles laying these ones down, so I'll use them on the back wall. And you also see I've used some other sort of smaller warning decals. So for that, I use this set here, Vertex Booz Modeling Works, and it just sort of has random, random sort of warnings and small little information decals. And I know I'll have a lot less problem with those than what I will with the ones that come in the kit. Okay, so to show you the process for applying decals, which I have shown before, this one's not going to be any different. I'm going to start with, let's start with the kite logo. So let's put that in the water. This water is just room temperature water. We'll also do the UN Spacey words as well. So yeah, room temperature water, and at the time I'm shooting this, it's actually quite cold out in the shed, so it will probably take a little bit for them to start to lift. In the meantime, I'm going to take some blue tack and sort of hold this in place, just so that I'm not sort of chasing the the model part around while I'm moving the decal around. Some of the other tools I use these blunt nose decal tweezers from Tamiya. These are fantastic. They have a really sort of narrow edge there, makes it easy to pick up the decals. I'll use just a bit of paper towel just to dab off the excess water. I'll use a toothpick generally to sort of move the decal around. I've got some brushes here which are used for applying Microset and Microsol. So when you're applying these solutions, microset goes down first and then microsol. Microset I find just helps the decal sit better on the surface, so it's not rolling around because of surface tension. If it's sitting on, if you put it down just with water, it'll tend to slip around quite a bit. So this helps with surface tension. It also helps with the adhesion. Now the microsol you put on afterwards, and that's really about having the decal sort of sink down into any panel lines and conform to the shape better. Both of these products are pretty mild. Like if you use some of the other products that are out there that might be, varying strengths, my experience is I prefer to use the milder products and apply multiple coats of them rather than go with something that's a lot more harsh. And I've had issues with paint reacting and that sort of thing. So that's why I sort of go with these. Okay, these decals are taking a while to come off the backing paper, so I've thrown some other ones in there while I'm waiting, just to sort of line them up and be able to apply them. So I should probably point out, I'm not sure if I've shown this before, so this is a wave decal tray, and the great thing about it is that it has this mechanism for raising the bed, so that way you're not sort of chasing the decals around in the water. So I tend to find that's a pretty good system. Of course, you don't need something as fancy as that. You can do it in just a container of water. Okay, I am going to now take my brush and apply a little bit of microset. Just apply it to where I want the decals to go up here. Okay, take my decal and I'm just going to wick off the excess water on the paper towel and then just gently sort of move the decal into place. Try and get it in a similar location to what I did with the previous ones. And I take a cotton bud and I just gently roll over the decal to squeeze out any excess moisture. Okay, and that one's done. Okay, so in space here, I put in here. Again, take the decal, wick off the excess water on a paper towel. And gently. Okay, this one's ready to come off yet. Like I said, it is a bit cool in my shed at the moment, so I know that is the reason why these decals are taking a little bit to come loose. Here we go. Okay, and again I'm going to compare it to the existing one that I've got. Looks pretty good. Yeah, I'm not going to be able to sort of roll a cotton bud in there, so I might just leave that one to dry for the time being. We are ready to apply some microsol. Now, where these decals aren't, sort of over a curved surface, or there's no panel lines, it's not so much of an issue, but it does help to reduce that sort of clear film around the edge of the decals. So we'll just apply some microsol to that. Alright, that's the process that I go through for doing the decals. I'll go ahead and apply some warnings here and there. I'll also do the ones on the fighter as well, so do them off camera and I'll come back and show you the result of those once they're done. Alright, I've finished applying the decals, and just some notes on them. I did have some problems with the older decals, so you can see here, this one on the side fell apart quite a bit, and it was really hard to sort of reconstruct what I had there. So it's far from perfect. The other one's not too bad, and these smaller decals went on just fine. So it looks as though it's the ones that have the white behind them that were causing me the most grief. So what I ended up doing was using quite warm water, and I would literally have to grab the carrier film from the side with the tweezers and peel it up. It wouldn't slide off the backing paper of its own volition. So a bit of a shame about that. I did manage to get the decals down on the wing, and you can see they've bedded down pretty well. Still a little bit of silvering there, but you know, they come up okay. That's the top of it, which is the better one. So yeah, like the VFs here, because they have the white painted behind them, they are also problematic. But yeah, all these little round parts were fine. You know, again, these ones were an issue just because, yeah, they have white behind them. So that seemed to be the issue, even though they were on the same decal sheet. I don't know what's happened there. The decals, the third-party sort of warning decals, they went down no problem at all. Just a few decals, so no issues there. And so yeah, I'll hit all these with Macross, you know, a couple more times just to make sure the decals are bedded right down before I give everything a matte coat. There was one thing that was a little bit disappointing. For the gun pod, they don't include the UN spacey that goes down the side of the gun for this particular set. Now, I'm not too fussed about it because this will be underneath the fighter, but it is an omission, and I don't have anything that's kind of the right size, so that's a little bit disappointing, but you know, pretty minor thing in the scheme of it. Okay, now that everything's got a matte coat on it, I can start the construction and the electronics. When I was working on the base earlier, I forgot to put an extra hole here just for the wiring that comes down the back of the wall. So I've put in a 3mm hole there. And I've also done some of the electronics off screen, or off camera I should say. This is a pretty simple circuit. What it is basically the USB is going to be powering the lights. So I've got a negative that goes to these little connectors. So I didn't want to be doing any soldering, you know, on the base of this thing while I'm sort of trying to get it assembled. So I've set it up so that I'll just be able to plug in each of the LEDs directly into this header here. It'll just make it a bit easier for assembly. So we've got the negative from the USB going to that. The positive goes to a switch, and of course the other side of the switch goes to the header block as well. Now I need to install this and make sure that it's in there, you know, so it's sturdy. Here we go. And the switch will go in the back here. So you sort of get an idea of what's going on. Now what I'll do is I will affix this with 2-part epoxy putty, and what I'm going to be using is this Premium Magic Putty by Infinity Model. So this stuff has a good working time of a couple of hours. It does take a long time to set though, so you probably need to give it a good 12-24 hours. Given that it's quite cool in the shed at the moment, I'll leave it 24 hours. But at least if I get this set up, I can work on starting to assemble everything else. Okay, I've done some sort of assembly. I've put the end caps on the engines. They've come up pretty good. So there's 3 of those. There's one that comes without the hooks, which I've glued into this bit, which of course goes into the floor. So when that rotates up, it reveals the engine there. The other one goes on this little cart, which I put together. And I have to work out what I'm going to do for attaching this to the hook. So here's the cross beam, and here's the hook that it sort of hangs from. So I've got to work out something that, you know, have it hanging off that hook. I have glued on the handrail to this platform here. I haven't glued it into the wall yet. I've got to sort of, I think I may drill out those holes, because that doesn't seem, yeah, I don't think they're quite, I think with the paint build up and everything, the 2 pins aren't going into those holes. And I've sort of gone back and watched, you know, previous videos that I've done of these and worked out that, yeah, I should have done that a while ago, because there's a couple of things that I needed to do. So one is to cut slots out the top here to allow for the covers to just slide down without them getting crimped. I've also glued in this backing piece here, so I'm definitely a lot happier with that compared to what I was going to have, which was just a blank sort of wall. This piece will go in after I've done the dry brushing, and speaking of which, I'm going to take some medium grey, make a colour from the layer, give that a good shake. I'm going to put a little bit on my tile here. And this needs to be really subtle. We're talking about, you know, a scale where you're not going to see a lot of sort of scratches and what have you. I'm going to take a soft, you know, flat brush, a little bit on the brush, and then I'm going to wipe it on the paper towel until I can't see anymore. Okay, so you think there's no paint on there, but when you go and sort of rub it across, it will start picking up some of those details. So I'm just going to do it on the sort of darker areas, just to pick out the edges. See, I've got a bit of dust stuck on there. But if you go up close, so it's just picked out those edges. It's really quite subtle, and that's all it needs. That's literally it. So that's that done. Now I can stick in these pipes, these extra pipe sort of details. So let's get this one in. I don't think this one needs glue. I think it'll just press fit. Yep, that's not going anywhere. And then I've got these 2 thin ones which will need to be glued in, so let's see if I can get this okay. Let's okay. Let's glue on the outside here as well, and then I can trim those off. Now, the whole idea was just to provide at least a little bit more sort of depth in there. So that'll be alright. And on here, as well glue this piece in. Okay. I think I'll let the pipes dry before I put the sort of walkway in. It's getting there. So another thing I've done is I've sort of glued this frame up. This is the front of the hanger. So just these 2 pieces. You can sort of see where the holes and the pegs are. I had to drill out those holes to 1.5 millimeters just to, or sorry, 1.2 I think it was. It wasn't by much, but and then just try and get it as square as possible using the grid on my cutting mat to do that. There's that. And then we've got the fighter. So the fighter has caused me a few issues. So first of all, it came up pretty good. I think the canopy works pretty well in black. Certainly I think it looks a bit better than painting it blue. You know, the wings fold out fine. I did have some issues trying to get these, you know, get the back all sort of snapped in place. It does look reasonably good. I think I probably could have used a little bit more microsol on the decals. Of course, the you know, legs do fold up and they just sort of clip in place. They give you the stand, so let me show you what it looks like with the stand. Put Actually the legs have to kind of come out forward a bit. I don't think you're going to come out forward enough. No. Sort of, it's weird. The stand's not great. You can sort of see that if I had the stand sort of sitting in place, his legs don't come forward enough to actually use the stand. So, I mean, it doesn't bother me because, of course, I will be using a landing gear instead. But, when it's all sort of, the legs are folded up, looks fine on the stand. Doesn't look great if it's sort of sitting in the hanger on the stand. I think that looks a bit odd, so I won't be doing that. But at least you know it does come with a stand, and I've got the let's sort of show some of the landing gear. There's the head as well, so I'm going to attempt to glue these in. I think the head will just push fit in. I'm going to start with the front landing gear. Let's just see if it's going to work. Okay, I'll let that dry and I'll put on the other ones probably off camera. But I think it'll look a lot better when it's got some landing gear on it. I think that's, like I said in the previous video, it's going to be a lot better than having it just sort of sitting on its legs. Okay, I've added the landing gear and the gun pod on the bottom. And thankfully it sits pretty flat without the gun pod sort of, touching the floor. So I'm pretty happy with that. I'm just sorry that it wasn't part of the actual kit itself. The other thing I did is just paint in some red dots on the side bits there, on the side details. And I just used some Tamiya enamel, XF7 flat red for that. Now, I was trying to work out how to hang the engine from the crane, and so I had some of this chain in my parts box, but it's for 1/48 scale. So it's probably a bit too large, a bit oversized. So I ended up using some jewellery chain. So thankfully my wife had some junk jewellery that I could butcher, and so this is just some cheap chain, and I cut off a length of it. It's not ideal, it doesn't actually really look like chain that you would use in an industrial situation, but what I've ended up doing is painting it. So I've used a bit of black enamel paint to paint this, and the paint's still sort of coming off, so you see on my fingers there. Just I fashioned a couple of little hooks on each end, and that will be what's used to sort of hang up the engine from the crane. Okay, the back wall's now finished. Stuck on the walkway, and I had to drill out the two holes a little bit just so that I could get the pegs in without breaking them. So I'm pretty happy with the way the back walls come up. Now we're ready to just dry fit the wall, just make sure it fits on the surface. I've also wired up some resistors to the LEDs on the girders, and I've added an extra length of wire just so that I can sort of wire it all up underneath. So gluing in the back wall, I just used a little bit of glue in the groove, and of course I did mask that groove off while I was painting, so it makes it a lot better for the glue to hold if it's not sort of having to deal with a painted surface. I can just line up the wall and get that in place. To fit the girders, I actually had to cut a little bit of the channel off that stores the lights. So I just had to trim them a little bit just to make sure that they fit on the uprights on the front of the kit. So that's how they're supposed to look. And of course I need to get the bars that go across the front, get them in place. Now, I haven't bothered using any glue for these. I think if I just friction fit them. Once it's all glued in place, they should hold there, no worries. They shouldn't actually need any glue. Famous last words. Okay, so line up the front struts and then set up the top girders. I've just got to make sure everything sort of lines up the corners and make sure that the wires are sort of being fed down the channels that I created. And it's quite tricky because it's not that stable. Like, it's not a perfectly rigid structure. So you do just have to be a little bit gentle with it. And it does sort of easily, you know, parts pop off. So once we've got it all lined up, then I can sort of start gluing it. Okay, to glue all the other joints, I just use some Tamiya extra thin, and just so I can sort of get in the gaps. So it's all sort of positioned and gently get sort of in the gaps. I don't want too much. Just press it down so the glue grabs. And then I just rinse and repeat for the rest of it. So down the bottom posts, just a little bit of glue, press it down. Go around the whole model. As far as the construction of the kit, this is certainly the trickiest part. So once that's all lined up and the glue is in place, I'm going to set that aside to dry before I do sort of anything else on the kit. Okay, so the glue's all dry now, and I've just taped up the wires on the back here. It looks messy until I sort of get all 4 of the kits built. I haven't worried too much about the wiring on the back. I think eventually I'll get them all sort of stuck together and tidy up all the wiring. Then I have to get, you can see the hole there, I need to get a flashing orange LED in there. So I've got this one here. If I hook it up to battery, I'll show you what it looks like. Okay, so you can see that just flashes on and off. So what I'm going to do is get stuck in place in that hole there, and then I'll wire up a resistor to it. And then basically these 2 sets of leads and this set of lead will go underneath and plug into the power supply. All right, so in order to get this in place, I'm just using my trusty UV resin. And I'm going to dunk the LED in the resin. Get it lined up where I want it. The hole. Okay, that's reasonably secure. Now let's try and sort of test what it looks like. I don't know how well this is going to work, but we will see. Okay, probably can't see that from there, but see it's flashing. It is actually working. So that'll do just to add a little bit more detail. All right. Now what I'll do is I'll take some tulip and just put it over the top to light block the back of it. So just some of this stuff is fabric paint, nice thick black paint. That way it'll stop any light bleed happening on the back. It's not a big deal, but that's where we're at. Okay, what I'm going to do next is solder on a resistor for this one, and then I am going to hook up some header pins. So header pins are just these things. I'll solder a few of them on, so that way it can plug in directly to the the power block I've got sort of installed on the bottom of it. Okay, managed to get everything together. The lights work, I have tested them, so that's all good. I apologise, you're only seeing the top of it here. Don't worry, we'll get to the beauty shots in a minute. Just a couple of words before we go to the beauty shots about this kit. First of all, out of the 3 I've built so far, this one seems like the least considered. There's a couple of things sort of, I guess, missing from this kit, which would have been the way to attach the engine to the crane. You can see it swinging here because I've set up a chain. It just seems odd they didn't sort of include just a little plastic part that sort of holds it on the crane there. The other thing is the landing gear for the fighter itself. So the way it kind of just sits there without any kind of landing gear is a bit odd. The rest of it's fine, and the rest of it is sort of the common parts that are across all of the kits anyway. So like the back of it and the figures and all that sort of thing. I mean, even the trolley, I would argue, is probably, you know, a lot less imaginative than some of the other vehicles you've got in the other sets. The little door gimmick at the bottom here, this is sort of a nice touch. It does work pretty well, so you can sort of flip it over to reveal the engine there, which is kind of nice. But yeah, the rest of it sort of seemed a little bit, I don't know, yeah, not as considered as the other kits. However, saying that, it's still a lot of fun to build, and these kits are really cool for the size of them. So I've got one left to go, and when I build that one, when I finally get around to building it, I will try and put all 4 of them together to see how they all look all lined up. But so far, just the 3 of them on the shelf look pretty good. So the beauty shots I'm going to show will just be of this kit. I won't bother lining up the other 2. I had a bit of an incident with one of them, and I have to fix that. So I'll just be showing this one. And until next build series, I'll catch you later.